I once saw a human kill a tank with a wrench and duct tape. General Kak's voice wavered as the footage played again for the 7th time. The Galactic Tribunal sat silent, horrified, fascinated, confused. On screen, the Terran soldier ducked behind a burning hovercraft, fiddled with a utility belt, then sprinted forward with a reckless abandon. Only a species with absolutely no survival instinct would attempt. The wrench clanged off the enemy tank's outer shell. Sparks flew. Duct tape flapped. A few seconds later, the alien war machine exploded like it had been hit with a fusion core. "That's not possible," whispered Counselor DM. "That wasn't even explosive-grade duct adhesive. None of it was." Kryak rubbed his earage. "And that is the problem. Across the galaxy, the humans were doing things no one understood, least of all the humans themselves. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards: chemical propellants, kinetic slugs, explosive warheads, analog dials. But their results were catastrophic. Where most species optimized through elegance, humans maximized through violence and stubbornness. Their weapons weren't precise. They were excessive. The tribunal had gathered to discuss the newest report from the front. The Talvathia species, famed for centuries as invincible, had lost an entire fleet to what was described as a Terran improvised anti-ship platform. The description was vague because the only surviving visual showed a cargo freighter with discarded rocket engines, ballistic turrets, and something called a pressure cooker bomb. Kathak cleared his throat. "We used to believe the solar impulse lance was the galaxy's most destructive ground weapon." Don raised an eyebrow. "It melts bunkers from orbit. Nothing can withstand that." "Yes," Crick nodded slowly. "And then humans showed up with something they call thermobaric grenades." One of the younger analysts activated a file. The tribunal chamber dimmed. The video that followed was low resolution, shaky, and accompanied by shouted 10 words that translated approximately to "Yeehaw." "And watch this." The result was terrifying. A single soldier lobbed a metallic cylinder into a building filled with entrenched enemy fighters. The blast sucked the air from the lungs of anything nearby, then ignited in a second wave of pressure. The structure disintegrated. Survivors claw at their helmets. "They don't even use clean energy," someone muttered. Kathak didn't respond. The footage kept playing. A human trooper in an old metal suit, its surface scratched and carbonged, waded through the ruins, swinging what looked like an oversized hammer. It turned out to be a mining tool called a hydraulic jack. He used it to bludgeon a Talvathi officer to death. The video ended with him sitting on the rubble, drinking from a flask. "Why don't they use more efficient weaponry?" Dell asked. "Because they don't think like us." Kathak's voice dropped. "They don't care about elegance or collateral damage or conservation. If it breaks the enemy, it's a success. And if it breaks them too, they call it character building." The tribunal buzzed with unease. Reports of human weapon shipments spreading through the sector were growing. Even non-human factions were beginning to smuggle Tan-made arms. Galactic black markets were flooded with Kalashnikov variants, RPGs, and Claymore mines. There were even rumors of species buying old Earth vehicles to retrofit into battle tanks. No shielding, no anti-grav, just steel, speed, and stupidity. "They have no safety systems," one Yoger hissed. "Their rifles jam. Their explosives are unstable. Their fighters overheat in combat." "Yes," Kak said. "And yet they win." Dell narrowed his eyes. "Are you suggesting we start using human weapons?" Kak paused. Then he tapped a small remote. The lights in the chamber flicker. "See again." This time it was not a video. It was a manifest. Line after line of recent purchases by the Galactic. Peacekeeping cores, M67 fragmentation grenades, M2 Browning heavy machine guns, Barrett anti-material rifles, Earth-made armor with added steel plates, duct tape, zip ties, Molotov cocktails. "It's already happening," he said. The room fell into stunned silence. Thousands of light years away, the front lines burned red. Lieutenant Javier Torres had stopped caring about interstellar politics weeks ago. His unit, the Irregulars, was made up of the worst equipped, most resourceful men Earth had ever deployed. Their ship had been shot down 3 days into the drop, and they'd scavenged everything since then. Their squad's armory looked like a junkyard. Javier, crouched behind a pile of alien corpses, holding a shotgun duct-taped to a plasma coil. He didn't know what it did exactly, but the last time he pulled the trigger, it blew the enemy into 3 directions. Next to him, Corporal D'Angelo was reloading, a mortar tube with modified soda cans filled with nails and accelerant. Sergeant Briggs was hand-cranking an old generator that powered a hacked alien laser cannon. Their last message from command had said, "Hold position." That was 10 days ago. So far, they'd held it against 3 waves of Drenth shock troops, 2 armored crawlers, and something they still didn't have a name for, but referred to as the Screamer. It took 3 claymores and a forklift to bring that thing down. Torres peeked over the barricade. A new wave of hostiles crested the hill. Sleek armor, standardized energy rifles, perfect formation. Fancy, D'Angelo muttered, lighting a fuse with a cigarette. The canister whistled through the air. 1 second later, the center of the enemy formation turned into a scrap heap. Reloading, and he called, ducking as laser fire scorched the rubble behind them. Briggs finished charging the alien cannon. He turned it on, aimed without sights, and pressed the trigger. The beam screamed through the sky and sliced a gunship in half. "Still works," he grunted. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and according to the strategist, supposed to be dead. But they had Earth weapons. They had human stubbornness, and most importantly, they had 0 regard for the enemy's sense of order. The battle raged. One of the hostiles tried flanking right, only to trip a tripwire made from shoelaces and a salvaged alien grenade. Another climbed the barricade and found himself face to face with a shovel wielded by Private Knox, who had named it Deborah. 2 hours later, the enemy had retreated. Their commander, an Ulari strategist, known for centuries of successful campaigns, reviewed the footage of the battle with shaking hands. He paused at the part where the humans had duct-taped 3 explosives to a ground drone and simply kicked it into an enemy foxhole. "I don't understand," he whispered. "This isn't strategy. This is madness." His adjutant said nothing. He was still, staring at the replay of a human firing a railgun with one arm while tossing a brick at a fleeing officer with the other. "This changes everything," the Ori commander muttered. And back at the tribunal, Sec agreed, because somewhere deep in a jungle under a smoldering sky, a Terran weapons engineer was laughing as he welded together 2 incompatible systems and muttered, "Let's see what happens." Lieutenant Torres wiped the blood from his forehead, looked down at the smoking barrel of his shotgun coil hybrid, and grinned. Around him, the Irregulars were already rebuilding their barricade with enemy corpses. Broken armor plating in a shipping crate labeled, "Do not detonate indoors." Knox was hammering support beams using a severed Drenth limb. Briggs was welding the alien cannon directly onto a rolling food cart. "We've got 12 hours before the next wave." Briggs grunted, not looking up, assuming they don't drop an orbital bomb just to be petty. "They won't," Torres replied. "Too many eyes on this sector. They lose face if they escalate." D'Angelo scoffed from his perch on the ridge. "They already lost more than face. They lost 20 high-performance combat droids to a pack of Earth monkeys with garden tools." "They weren't all garden tools," Knox said from below, lifting Deborah for emphasis. "Deborah is technically a multi-purpose trenching implement. Sure, man. Just don't ask it to fix the plumbing dot down in the valley." Smoke rose over scorched earth and metal slag. The battlefield was a graveyard of doctrine. The Ulara's precision, formations, reinforced halls, and quantumed artillery had been rendered useless against chaos. Pure distilled Terran chaos, Half the kills weren't even from direct fire. They were from sabotage, noise traps, baiting tactics, and weapons that had no right functioning, let alone decimating a platoon. "Command sending us a crate," Torres finally said, holding up a blinking comms beacon. "Drop scheduled in 40 minutes. Supposed to be Please tell me it's not another crate of butter knives labeled thermal pikes." D'Angelo groaned. "They said Earth prototype? That's all I got." This caught Briggs's attention. "If it's from Earth's Black Labs, we're either getting something brilliant or something illegal in 39 systems." 39 minutes later, the crate dropped like a meteor, or embedded itself halfway into the rock. A burst of hiss escaped as the locking mechanisms disengaged. The team gathered around it, half shielding their eyes. Why? Half eager for another impossible tool of destruction. The lid creaked open. Inside was a single steel object. Knox blinked. "Is that a shopping cart?" Torres reached in. It was in fact a shopping cart, though heavily reinforced, rigged with treaded wheels and retrofitted with what appeared to be a compressed rail mechanism beneath the frame. A folded note was zip-tied to the handle. "Project Yeet, wagon, push hard. Do not ask questions." Torres read it twice. Well, that tracks. Briggs was already attaching a small fusion charge to the back. 2 hours later, during the next Ulari advance, they deployed the cart with Knox and D'Angelo sprinting behind it, and a screaming plasma warhead strapped to its base. The Yeet wagon flew down the slope at 30 km/h, struck the enemy tank squarely in the side, and detonated with a blast large enough to flip a second vehicle 3 meters. Into the air, the rest of the irregulars opened fire from the ridgeline. The commander, watching from a safe hover platform, said only one word before retreating: "Humans." Far above the conflict zone, Admiral Krevik of the Ulari High Armada paced inside the war room of his flagship. Dozens of hollow feeds buzzed around him. Tactical overlays, live broadcasts, intercepted comms. Each one told the same story. Humans weren't winning with superior tactics or technology. They were winning because nothing they did made sense. "What?" "Condamind invents a weapon that explodes twice," Krevik demanded. "They call it the bouncer charge," his strategist answered. "First blast lifts the target into the air. Second one explodes mid-air for maximum disruption," Krev growled. "And the weapon with the spinning blade and nails. Weed whacker of doom, according to field reports. And that thing that launched spikes from a compressed tube, refitted nail gun, paintball components, range 30 meters, casualties 9. He stormed toward the central feed. It showed a group of humans ambushing a convoy using firecrackers, reflective tape, and what appeared to be honking rubber chickens. Somehow this had confused the targeting AI of the lead walker, which triggered a friendly fire cascade and destroyed the rest of the formation. "They are defeating trillion credit war machines with party supplies," Krevik said. "They're not bound by standard logic," the strategist replied. "They repurpose, they hybridize, they weaponize things we would never consider. Where other species build tools with purpose, humans build chaos with intention." Meanwhile, on Earth, in a rusting warehouse labeled retired military surplus and bait shop, Harold McKinnon leaned back in his folding chair and watched a massive alien diplomat try to understand the specifications of a leaf blower converted into an anti-cannon. "So, this," Harold said, petting the side of the device, "used to be for leaves. Now great for crowd control, fire, sand, nails, screws, hot sauce packets, you name it." The Ulari representative blinked slowly, and humans actually deploy these into active war zones. "Buddy, they ask me for blueprints. I give them a shovel and 3 feet of wire. They make it work. Do you understand the level of military disruption you're causing?" Harold sipped from a thermos. "You ever hear of the Battle of Wex's Ridge?" "Yes, that was where your troops detonated 16 barrels of cooking oil and rolled its flaming tires down a slope. Yep, Harold smiled. That was one of mine. The alien diplomat swallowed hard. We'd like to request a demonstration. Back at the front, Torres had upgraded the alien cannon cart into what D'Angelo now called the Wheel of Regret. It could rotate 360, fired on voice command, and played music while charging. Right now, it was blaring something called Death Paw while shredding through enemy bunkers. New recruits had begun trickling into the irregulars' camp. One of them, Private Quan, was watching in horror as Briggs duct-taped for grenades to a drone and launched it straight into enemy airspace. You guys just do this. Torres handed him a roll of wire and a gas canister. No manuals, no rules. Just make sure it hurts on contact. But this isn't regulation. That's the point. If it was regulation, it wouldn't be Earth-made. A shriek filled the air. Enemy reinforcements. Dozens of carriers, heavily armored. Torres smiled. All right, boys. They brought tanks. We bring Deborah. Knox held up the shovel like it was a holy artifact. Behind him, someone primed a jet engine mounted to a steel sled. As the alien tanks rolled into view, the irregulars charged. A maniacal horde of dirt-smeared humans, armed with equipment that shouldn't work, but always did. Somewhere far behind the lines, a general asked, "What do we even call this strategy?" And the answer came from a junior officer watching alive. Feet of a man in shorts using a chainsaw to deflect laser blasts. It's not a strategy, he said. By any it's Earth. The enemy tanks didn't stand a chance. The first was stopped cold by a makeshift landmine. A buried tool chest filled with flammable chemicals wired to a garage door spring and a kitchen timer. The resulting blast flipped the entire column's lead vehicle, blocking the path behind it. The second tank rolled forward anyway, but was immediately pelted with adhesive jugs hurled from the treetops by the irregulars. Seconds later, a flare ignited the sticky cocktail, homemade napalm. Then came the screams. Knox darted forward. Deborah raised, leading the charge of 20 muddy, barely armored humans, charging headlong into a mechanized enemy force. What they lacked in coordination, they made up for in volume, speed, and reckless disregard for the laws of physics or self-preservation. D'Angelo launched his last soda can mortar straight into the gunner hatch of a heavy crawler. It didn't just explode. It erupted in a shrieking spray of shrapnel and orange foam. "That's the chili powder can," he yelled. "I told you it'd work." "Shut up and reload," Briggs barked, pushing the Wheel of Regret forward with one shoulder as it tore holes. Through enemy cover, up on the ridge line, Torres watched the chaos unfold and keyed the mic. "Package ready," a voice crackled back. "Affirmative. Awaiting green light." "Do it." Far above, hidden from all sensors, a satellite-linked crate snapped open in orbit. Inside was the final prototype, Project Boomerang, a weapon too unpredictable to be used by any other faction in the galaxy. The device hurtled downward, screaming through atmosphere, wrapped in a blade of ceramic plating and trailing sparks. It hit with the force of a meteor, carving a crater into the field just as the last of the Ari reinforcements began forming a fallback line. Then it hummed for a moment. Everything stilled. Torres grabbed the fresh recruits and threw them to the ground, down. The device exploded, not once, but 3 times in succession, each with a different radius and frequency. The first pulse knocked electronics offline across 5 kilometers. The second released an overpress shockwave so strong it turned reinforced exosuits into crushed tin cans. The final blast triggered the delayed detonation of every high-energy cell in a 100-meter radius. A cascade of fire and chain reactions tore through the Ulari position. By the time the smoke cleared, nothing remained of the once imposing army except for twisted wreckage, smoldering armor, and scattered malfunctioning drones, trying to flee the battlefield by crawling. The irregulars stood in the silence. Some were coughing, others laughing. One had somehow rigged a grill from a broken crawler exhaust and was roasting sausage links. Torres looked up as the comms lit again. "This is command. We read the detonation. Confirmed status." He keyed back, panting. "Confirmed. Sector secured. Weapon successful. Irregular. Standing by. Good work, Lieutenant. Uploading full tactical logs now. Be advised. Olari High Command has issued a conditional surrender. Treaty talks are opening." D'Angelo leaned in. "Did we just win the war with a shopping cart, a shovel, and leftover barbecue fuel?" "Sounds about right," Briggs muttered, wiping soot off his helmet. Torres stared over the valley. What had once been an organized Ulari push was now a debris field littered with parts of advanced weaponry made useless by duct tape, chaos, and Terran improvisation. "They had every advantage," he said quietly. "Technology, numbers, strategy. They just didn't have Earth," Knox said, tapping Deborah against the ground. Weeks later in the Grand Galactic Archives, a new exhibit was added under the section titled Weapons of Mass Disruption. There was no fanfare, no grand opening, just a quiet plaque, and a collection of seemingly random objects behind reinforced glass: a battered wrench, a burnt shovel, a dented shopping cart, a roll of duct tape, and a worn-out boot. The exhibit attracted confused visitors. Alien scholars from across the stars debated endlessly how any of these things could have ended the greatest military campaign in the Quadrant's history. A short Terran engineer eventually visited the hall, hands in his pockets. He looked at the items with quiet nostalgia, then scribbled something on a post-it note and stuck it next to the glass. It read, "Turns out the best weapons don't come from factories. They come from Earth."